It is often believed that the Gestapo was an organisation which employed hundreds of thousands of people and which controlled every aspect of life within National Socialist Germany and later in the occupied territories. That is the myth. In fact, the Gestapo was a comparatively small organisation which relied very heavily on denunciations. The reasons why people worked with the Gestapo varied. Such denunciations came from people who believed in the National Socialist system, as well as those who were being blackmailed by the Gestapo into giving information. Some freelance agents who chose to work for the Gestapo did so for the cash or rewards that it brought to them, whilst they were in a position to exploit their contacts. Into the latter group falls one Dagmar Imgart, a Gestapo agent from Sweden whose case became quite well known in the immediate post-war period due to the death sentences handed down to people in the German resistance because of her. In this video, I shall tell her story. Dagmar Imgart was born Dagmar Eterling on the 8th of June 1896 in Ramsberg in the municipality of Lindesberg in the central Swedish province of Örebro. Her parents were farmers. In 1922 she went to Germany to learn the language. In Stettin, now Szczecin in Poland, she met Dr. Otto Imgart. They married on the 28th of October 1922. They had one child, Birgitta. Otto Imgart was a member of the Wien-Golf Association, which is an umbrella organisation of Christian student fraternities. Through this membership, in 1925 he took on the honorary role of Federal Statistician for the Association of Old Wien-Golfs, and finally became Federal Archivist in 1927, an activity that suited him well as he saw himself as an amateur historian. Through her husband's work, Dagmar Imgart also gained increased contact with pastors and academics, amongst others. Hitler came to power in 1933. All student and Christian associations came under increasing pressure from the Nazi Student Association. The Wien-Golf associations were dissolved in the next 2 years. The Imgarts moved to Gießen in 1936, however they maintained the contacts they had made. As a foreign national, Dagmar Imgart could travel to Sweden, but for that she did need a permit. Her journeys brought her to the attention of the Gestapo. Whether they recruited her or she volunteered is not known, but by 1941 she was a Gestapo agent. This meant that she was able to travel to Sweden during the war and receive gifts and money for people in war-torn Germany. As Agent V140, her codename was Babs, a name she chose as it had been a name of affection given to her when she was a child. She was assigned to the Gestapo Church Enlightenment Department. Her job was thus to spy on the church organisations which were opposed to the National Socialist system. Her Gestapo handlers requested that she become a member of the Una Sancta movement in 1941, and from 1942 forced herself into the circle around the pastor and Orientalist Alfred Kaufmann. Kaufmann had been a member of the Wien-Golf in Gießen. Kaufmann had belonged to the right in German politics and had been a supporter of the DNVP, Deutsche Nationale Volkspartei, the party that had allied itself with Hitler, allowing him to get a majority after the fraudulent elections of March 1933. Many years earlier, Kaufmann had been the pastor to the parents of Rudolf Hess in Alexandria and had baptized the future deputy Führer. People of how he'd done his bit for the National Socialists in the seizure of power in Gießen. However, by the end of the 1930s, Kaufmann had changed his mind and clearly did not think much of the National Socialists. He brought attention to himself not only because of his refusal of the Hitler salute, but also by his lectures, which meant that he had to travel around the country. He had formed a circle of friends who would meet and talk. This was a literary circle, a social club. They did not plan resistance activities as such, but they did chat about what they had heard on foreign radio broadcasts, made fun of the Nazis, and generally said what was on their minds. To make it worse, the association between Kaufmann and Rudolf Hess became known. After the Hess flight to the United Kingdom in 1941, this association was one of suspicion, and the Gestapo may have thought that somehow he was still in contact with Hess. Imgart regularly passed information about this circle of friends to the Gestapo. On the 6th of February 1942, she was detained by the Gestapo, but this was only not to blow her cover. That evening and the following morning, the Gestapo arrested everyone in the group. After a show trial on the 20th to 21st of July 1942, Alfred Kaufmann and Heinrich Willi were sentenced to death by the People's Court. This was the first trial where the death sentence was given for the crime of listening to foreign radio broadcasts. Elisabeth Willi, the wife of Heinrich Willi, was given a prison sentence. From prison she was sent to Auschwitz, where she was murdered. Another member of the group was beaten to death by the Darmstadt Gestapo. Heinrich Willi was executed by guillotine in the Frankfurt-Prongesheim prison on the evening of the 19th of February 1943. The following day, by order of the People's Court, posters announced the execution throughout Gießen and the surrounding area. On the 21st of February 1943, celebrations on the day of school were ordered to mark Willi's execution, a rather bizarre act of revenge by the regime given that the disaster of Stalingrad had happened only 3 weeks before. Several requests for clemency were made for Alfred Kaufmann. His sentence was commuted to life in prison and he was transferred to the Butzbach prison. He remained there until American troops freed him on the 1st of April 1945. He managed to survive the inhumane prison conditions, but only just, and he died the following year, in 1946, in Heilbronn, at the age of 78. Once everyone had been rounded up, Imgart was released. Those who did not know would have assumed that the Gestapo could find nothing on her and she was released on the grounds that she had a daughter to look after. It is of course likely that everyone who knew of the existence of the Literary Society was now in Gestapo custody. Because of her membership in the ecumenical Una Sancta and her ability to travel to Sweden as a Swedish citizen even during the war, Berlin priest Father Max Joseph Metzger asked if Dagmar Imgart could deliver a letter for him to the Archbishop of Uppsala, Erling Eden. She agreed, but she did not give the letter to the Archbishop of Uppsala, but to her Gestapo handlers. Metzger had written a few details on how a future free and democratic Germany would be following liberation. Metzger was arrested on the 29th of June 1943 and sentenced to death on the 14th of October 1943. He was executed on the 17th of April 1944 in Brandenburg. In August 1944, her husband, Otto Imgart, was recruited into being a guard at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. He was given the rank of SS Unterscharführer. In January 1945, Dagmar Imgart travelled to Sweden with her daughter. Whether to get out of harm's way or on a Gestapo mission is not clear. Meanwhile, typhus was running amok at Bergen-Belsen. The prisoners in crowded cold barracks and inadequately fed succumbed quickly owing to their weakened resistance to the disease, but some guards contracted it too. One of the victims was her husband, who died on the 25th of April 1945. The Swedish authorities got wind of what Dagmar Imgart had been doing for the Third Reich. She was brought in for questioning, then expelled from Sweden on the 13th of September 1946. She spent a short time at Amstal-Ockensol Psychiatric Hospital in Hamburg-Langenhorn before she was tried in Gießen in 1947. After a well-publicised trial, she was sentenced to 10 years in a labour camp on the 18th of August 1947. She was sent to prison in Darmstadt but was released on appeal. On the 31st of October 1949, the Gießen Regional Court refused to open the main proceedings against her. After a new trial before the Limburg Jury Court, Dagmar Imgart was acquitted on the 31st of October 1951. This photograph was taken then. She's seated with her defence lawyer Margareta Trust, and when the acquittal came down she burst into tears. Nonetheless, this was not the end of the road for her legal woes. The judgment was overturned on appeal on the 29th of January 1953 by the Federal Court of Justice, and the matter was referred to the Kassel Regional Court for a new hearing. On the 16th of November 1954, this court imposed a 15-month prison sentence for aiding and abetting the deprivation of liberty. A further appeal was rejected by the Federal Court of Justice on the 28th of June 1956. In February 1957, Dagmar Imgart began her prison sentence in the Frankfurt-Preugenstein women's prison after taking into account the pre-trial detention only amounted to a few months inside. On the 14th of June 1957, she was released on probation with the remainder of her sentence suspended. She first moved to Zwingenberg on the Bergstrasse south of Darmstadt at the western tip of the Odenwald. Although she moved around to different houses, she stayed in this area for the rest of her life. In 1960, she moved to nearby Bensheim. On the 30th of August 1980, Dagmar Imgart died at the age of 84 in Seeheim-Jugendheim. She claimed to the end of her life that she'd never betrayed anyone to the Gestapo. Hope you found that interesting. If you did, you might want to subscribe. I upload every Friday at 2000 hours my time. I live in Poland and Germany, so obviously that's a different time in different places. I sometimes upload at other days and times as well, so the best way to know when I'm uploading is to subscribe. But for the moment, all the best from me. Thanks for listening.